More than 300 Sewerage and Water Board employees were at their posts when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans on August 29, 2005. And they stayed through the catastrophic flooding that engulfed 80% of New Orleans after the levees broke. These dedicated and heroic employees were first responders providing critical emergency sewerage and water board system restorations, while in many instances fighting for their own survival and the survival of others. Their valiant efforts must not be forgotten but preserved for austerity as a testament to the courage, tenacity, and dedication of these employees in the face of overwhelming odds. For the benefit of the people who are watching this interview who don't know you, tell them your name and what you do at the Sewerage and Water Board.
My name is Theola Garrett. I work as a management development specialist too in the Office of Community and Intergovernmental Relations.
Well, what's a management development specialist?
In my department, it's a catch-all. A management development specialist is a management person, a clerical person, a laborer. In my department, I do everything. But basically, it's a level 2 management position for the agency. And we do different types of management jobs.
Where were you and what were you doing when the levees broke?
Actually, when the levees breached, I was in a place called Zachary, Louisiana. I decided to evacuate on the Saturday before the devastation occurred.
So, when did you become aware of the devastation that the Sewerage and Water Board had to contend with?
I believe the day after the levee breached and the news cameras were available and daylight came and we could actually see what had happened to the city of New Orleans, I was devastated. I was shocked. I was hurt. But I couldn't let any of that affect me emotionally. I just felt that I have to do something.
How did you manage not to be affected emotionally?
I think I just put myself in the position of everybody else. I said, everybody's affected by the flooding. I'm no different. So I just move on from here.
Since you were looking at all this devastation, what was going through your mind as a member of the Sewerage and Water Board?
I wondered what could I do to help the agency recover from the devastation that I was seeing. And that's the thing that I worried about more than my own personal damages.
Mm-hmm. How did it feel not being able to get in touch with anyone?
As you might imagine, it was emotionally draining. I called my supervisor over and over again, but cell communication was down in the city at that time. And plus he was bombarded with media inquiries, so it was at least 6 days before I could actually speak with my supervisor to find out what was going on with the agency.
6 days?
6 days.
So we're talking about 6 days of tremendous anxiety.
Anxiety, really.
And during this process, while you're waiting 6 days trying, were you trying over and over and over?
Over and over. I called over and over again, but as I said, cell towers were down and communication was just chaotic in the city at that time.
Mm-hmm. And what were you thinking in terms of what would happen to the city of New Orleans after this kind of catastrophe?
I didn't know what to expect. And I couldn't see beyond what was in front of me at that time. I wasn't even thinking down the line how the city would have to recover from this. Mm-hmm. All I could think about was what could I do? Mm-hmm. And that was my main focus.
With that thought in your mind, when were you able to return to work?
Actually, in my perspective, I never really stopped working because when I did reach my supervisor, he informed me that there would be a conference call with our executive director over at the Office of Emergency Management in Baton Rouge, and that if I could find my way there, I could come and be a part of the conference call to see what the agency was going to do to begin the recovery process. And that's what I did.
So how did you find your way there?
I learned to get around Baton Rouge pretty good. And after a while, I got accustomed to going to this one particular place because we had weekly conference calls, and I could manage to get there by automobile.
And what did you do once you got there?
Well, on our very first conference call with our executive director, she actually asked me if I could look for a temporary office space for the Sewerage and Water Board in the Baton Rouge area. And that real estate task was normally something that was done by another board employee, but that person was evacuated to Memphis, Tennessee, and was not available to take care of real estate activities. And so she asked me, and I accepted the responsibility and went to work and looking for a place to set up an office in Baton Rouge.
So you were instrumental in the process of setting up a Sewerage and Water
Yes.
Board office in
Yes.
Baton Rouge for New Orleans.
Yes. And we had that conference call with her on Tuesday, and I spent that Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday calling every real estate agent excuse me, that I could find in the Baton Rouge area to assist me with trying to find an office space. And it wasn't easy because, as you might imagine, a lot of businesses from the New Orleans area were seeking office spaces to set up in Baton Rouge. And however, by that Thursday, I had secured a building. And I'm very proud of that because I'm not in real estate. I don't have any real estate contacts, but I was able to track down one real estate agent who would listen to my story when I told her I worked for the water department out of the city of New Orleans. And she paid attention to me. She was mindful of what we do. And she said, I've got a building, but the U.S. Coast Guard out of New Orleans and the welfare department out of New Orleans are looking at this building. So if you want it, you've got to move really fast. And that's what I did.
And that's what you did?
I did. I contacted our legal department and asked them to make arrangements to sign the lease agreement for the property. And by September the 9th, they had done so. So this was just a matter of 11 days from Katrina to the day that we had secured that building and knew where we were going to set up our temporary office spaces.
So you got your marching orders from
Yes.
Ms. St. Martin
Yes.
on a Tuesday.
Yes.
And by Thursday,
we had secured
you
that
had
building.
secured that building.
Yes, sir.
And you are not
Not
an
in-
expert in
real estate at all. Had no contacts whatsoever, but I was on it.
You were definitely
I was on
you
it.
were definitely
I was
on it.
on it, and I pleaded our case to the point that the Sewerage and Water Board received consideration for that office space above those other agencies.
Above the
U.S. Coast Guard from the lakefront and from the Welfare Department of New Orleans that was working in New Orleans.
you had to move some pretty high mountains to get
I did.
to this place.
And I don't know how I did it. All I know is it had to be done. And that was my goal, to get it done.
What was your first thought when Ms. St. Martin said, I want you to go and find us an office space in
I
Baton Rouge?
thought of all the things that she could ask me to do. Why did she ask me to find real estate? That is not my area. But I could not tell her to ask somebody else. She asked me, and I felt that I should try to comply with her request.
And to what extent do you feel like that helped the Sewerage and Water Board on the road to recovery?
Oh my goodness, I think it was major because we were able to set up our finance administration office there to help us to track down and to meet payroll. We had our legal department there. We had our purchasing agent that had an office there. Accounting and payroll and economically disadvantaged business, our environmental affairs department, all of these people came together in that building to keep services going, to keep things going.
And you were able to then reunite with all the people you'd been concerned about.
Oh yes, absolutely. And that building was an anchor for the employees who were scattered across the country. When they learned that the Sewerage and Water Board had an office in Baton Rouge, everybody would come to that office because people were suffering from separation anxieties. And they just wanted to get somewhere, to see somebody from the agency, talk to them, whether they worked at the same facility or not. So it was almost like a welcoming center where people could come back to Louisiana, come to the building, find out what was going on with the agency, where they could go to return to work, and all kinds of things of that nature.
So this was an essential step in the movement towards
I believe
recovery.
it was central in getting the employees who were displaced, having a central location for them to come to, or having a central phone number that they could call and actually talk to somebody from the agency.
Could you see from your vantage point at that time that things were moving in a good direction? And could you see the New Orleans area getting back on its feet in your mind's eye?
I don't know. All I saw was what was before me, and I kind of was on automatic pilot. I was just doing the things that needed to be done. I was flying. I'm not necessarily was in the controls, but I had the plane going.
You got the plane off the ground.
I had it going.
You didn't know how it was going to land, but you had it off.
I didn't know how it was going to work, and we took things day by day at that time. You just had to take it day by day because you didn't know what each new day would bring. But whatever challenge was thrown at us, we were able to meet it.
It sounds like it. What other responsibilities did you have?
Well, I had to step outside of my normal supervision responsibilities because we had people from our customer service department located in the Baton Rouge office, but there were no customer service supervisors available to supervise them. So I worked with them. I worked with people from our central yard facility. I worked with people from our purchasing and printing department. So every department that didn't have a supervisor on site, I was able to work and coordinate everything to keep everything going.
And how did that help you cope with what was going on?
I think it helped a lot because it distracted me from my own personal loss. All I was focused on was the Sewerage Water Board and helping them to get operations stable and then work to being normal.
And what about your personal losses? What kind of losses did you suffer?
I lived 1 block from the levee breach on the Industrial Canal.
Oh my goodness.
So when the waters came, my house was washed away. And
your house just...
Oh, literally, was moved to another person's property. And we actually had trouble finding it. My insurance adjuster said, I hate to tell you this, but your house and every other house on your block is gone. I don't know where your house is to even give you an adjustment, an evaluation, an appraisal on your damages because I don't know where the house is. So it took some time, but they did find it.
What was your reaction when you saw the extent of the devastation in your community in the Ninth Ward?
It was heartbreaking. Oh my goodness. It was really heartbreaking. When we were allowed to go back into the lower Ninth Ward, the Army still wouldn't let people who lived in my area close to the breach, they wouldn't let us in. They told us the closest we could get to see the devastation we had experienced was Caffin Avenue.
Oh my goodness.
And I was talking to a colonel and I began to get teary-eyed and he said, okay, wait, I'll get somebody to take you in. And he did take me and a neighbor who lived around the corner from me to give us a special escort in so that we could have some closure. It was harder for the lady who rode with me than it was for me because all I lost was my house and all of my material things. But her husband had stayed.
Oh my goodness.
And they had not heard from him when they said you could go back to see your damages, so she'd never heard from her husband. So there were different levels of loss, and so I got over mine really quick when I think about what other people lost.
So no question that what you were doing to give people service, to help them have some modicum
Yes.
of recovery, helped you cope with what was going on
Oh, yes,
personally.
it did. Yes, yes. It took my mind off of my personal loss completely.
And last question, how important do you think the Sewerage and Water Board was to get people back into their homes to restart their lives?
I think it was extremely important because if you don't have a drinking water system and a wastewater system. Those services people can't do without. And in order for people to get back into their homes, those systems had to be stabilized and brought back on board, excuse me, 100%, so that other people could come back and start normalizing their own lives.
I said that was the last question, but I do want to ask this question because of your dedication. What made you want to stay?
I never thought of not staying. The thought didn't occur to me. It was like a natural order of what I had to do.
You felt like you owed that to the citizens of New Orleans.
I did. I owed it to the city, to my community, to do what I could do.
Well, thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The flooding of New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina was the most devastating disaster to hit any U.S. city. When most of the city was evacuating, some 300 Sewerage and Water Board employees stayed on the job, facing great personal peril to respond to this devastating crisis. We salute our Katrina heroes who met the greatest challenge of their lives and found a way to rise above the storm and overcome the impact of Hurricane Katrina. The board's forces dewatered the city in 11 days after the breaches were closed and began to restore quality of life, services of water, sewer, and drainage to the city. It was the restoration of these services that made it possible for citizens to return. It was the restoration of these services that made it possible for progress to begin, going from devastation to recovery, restoration, and today, rebuilding of the most complex infrastructure in the country. Today, confidence in the Sewerage and Water Board's management and fiscal responsibility has resulted in the first water and sewer rate increases since the 1990s. These increases will be the building blocks for the development and the continuous rebuilding of the board's systems in the future.